Okay, folks, here we go. Second review, and this is not as long as the first. So hopefully you had time to maybe take a break, get a beverage. Water is always great when you're studying. Stay hydrated and get ready for the next run through of information. This is from last Monday and Tuesday, October 2nd and October 3rd. Don't forget, happy Rocktober. So, still looking at key terms in comparative government and politics. What we looked at last week, we revisited the concept of formal politics. So we did informal the day before, now formal politics, and we looked at the three-world model and its problems. There he is. There's the Rock. Wishing you a happy Rocktober. Let's jump into this right now. Formal politics. Here's the definition. The formal definition. That was kind of not a great joke, but it worked. Anyway, visible public way that a political system functions with structures for government that are set down in a written constitution or by legal history and tradition. Remember at the very beginning of the year, we talked about countries without a constitution. Israel does not have a written constitution. The UK does not have a written constitution. The vast majority of other countries in the world do have written constitutions, but whether that document is all contained in one place or is a group of documents in history and traditions, we still get the structures for formal politics in that information. So this is where, to return to the last review that you just hopefully watched, we're going to use the structural functional approach throughout the year. Some examples: legislative systems, executive branches, judicial systems, executive cabinets, electoral systems, any specific concrete written down on paper part of a government and a political system is part of formal politics. These can also be formally documented norms, rules, judicial decisions, and guidelines. And I'm going to run through some of these right now, like the ones that are listed below. Here we go. So first off, an example of formal politics: debates in a legislative branch, where the rules for the debates are set by the individual house of the legislative branch where the debates are happening place, like with these individuals who, if you don't know, that is Prime Minister Rishi Sunak from the British Conservative Party and Sir Keir Starmer of the Labour Party. If you want to see exactly how a debate would play itself out, I suggest that you check out that link from last September where the two of them squared off. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but you might find it interesting. Another example of formal politics: the state opening of the British Parliament. We'll talk about this more in a couple of months, but this is where we have tradition that requires a speech by the monarch to actually let the business of Parliament take place. There we are in Parliament. There's King Chuck III. There's Queen Camilla. And over here, Prince William. Oh, wait, that's Prince William with hair. That's what happens when you get older, folks. Oh, and if you want to see what the opening of Parliament looks like, you can check out the link. Please do so in the Google Slides for William. Also, the State of the Union address in the United States. Why is this part of formal politics? Well, it's required in our Constitution. Article 2, Section 3, Clause 1. The president is required to give the Congress information of the state of the union and recommend to their consideration such measures and as he shall judge necessary and expedient. In other words, the president has to tell Congress what he's doing and let Congress know what she as president or he as president needs. This is once a year in the House of Representatives with all the members of the Senate. Some Supreme Court justices are also there and invited guests. There we are. Look, Biden. Sometimes we actually get applause from Kamala Harris, the vice president, who sits on the right of the president as the VP. On the left, there's Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. Sometimes he also claps as well. Yes, President Biden. But we know what happened to Speaker McCarthy last week, so he's no longer Speaker. And that's the State of the Union. Booyah. Another example, formal politics, the voting process. Folks, all the different ways that legislative elections take place, majoritarian electoral systems, proportional electoral systems, mixed electoral systems. We're going to talk about them all this year, and I know you're just too excited for words. In executive elections, there are qualified majority electoral systems, absolute majority electoral systems, plurality electoral systems, alternative vote electoral systems, and of course, your favorite and mine, the electoral college system. Now, wanted to give you some really cool information that I found out, folks. Exciting stuff. Remember how I said in class that only the United States has an electoral college? Guess what, folks? I was wrong. Hold on to your hats. Sit down. You should be sitting watching this anyway. And prepare yourself because there are electoral colleges in France where there is a group of people called the Grands Électeurs who are local representatives, mayors, council people from across France. They actually elect the Senate in France through an electoral college. Side note with this, prior to 1962, there was a presidential referendum in France. The president of France, presidential referendum meaning the people had a popular vote on how to elect the president, how to change it. Okay. Prior to 1962, the president of France was chosen indirectly by the Electoral College, just like in the United States. I didn't know this, folks. Also, Estonia has an electoral college. Kazakhstan has an electoral college. And we have the Irish Senate, the Senedd Éireann, where the Electoral College elects or chooses the senators there. Also, drum roll for 2024 in Georgia, shout out to Dimitri in period 2, the president in Georgia will be elected through an electoral college voting system. So, hey, we're not as special as I thought we were. And always don't ever forget, unicorns are the best kind of electoral system ever. Other formal politics, judicial decisions about civil rights and civil liberties. Really strong example of this would be the Roe versus Wade decision that overturned 40 years of precedent in the United States that happened last year in June. Link there if you want to check out how that was reported on by CNBC last year. And that just clicked incorrectly. Sorry about that. Another example of formal politics would be, and I mentioned a referendum, like for the president in France, just to make sure we've got the definition though. If you've forgotten what a referendum is from last year, or you missed us talking about in class, a referendum is a popular vote to approve a government policy. An example of this, the vote to stay in or out of the European Union that took place in the UK in 2016. If you'd like to check out the links in the Google slide deck. We got some historical footage of what happened that night when it was announced at 4:40 in the morning that the vote had gone through. And then, of course, the aftermath. Where we are now, with Brexit having happened, well, we are in what might be called a state of regret. And you can check out the link in the Google slide deck for a report in the UK on how things are going now that everything's changed. Another example, formal politics. Actually, no, sorry, there isn't another example of formal politics. That was it. Let's look at the three world model that we talked about in class and briefly some of its challenges. I'll freely admit, folks, I'm just excited because I put a really shiny map together, a series of maps. So prepare yourself. Reminder from the text, this is how countries, areas of the world were compared and classified starting in the 1970s during the Cold War. First world economies were capitalist nations in NATO and Western Bloc countries with what are called advanced economies. Talk more about that in the next set of review slides. Second world, communist countries, USSR, now Russia, USSR, Eastern Bloc countries, China, Vietnam, North Korea. Third world countries, kind of everybody else. The countries that were either neutral or who didn't fit in either category. When you look on the map, this might be a little bit more clear. Again, I'm showing off slightly with the maps, but why this was a problem. Generally, these were the countries that had been colonized by the First World or the Second World. And sometimes there were also colonies that were economically developing, like those in Latin America, or countries that had proxy wars. Remember proxy wars, like, for example, the war between Iraq and Iran that we'll talk about later this year that happened in the 1980s. Vietnam War can be looked at as a proxy war. The Korean War can be looked at as a proxy war between the US and the USSR, and sometimes China as well in the case of Korea. Here we go with the maps. Get ready. First world countries. So first world countries, we have Western Bloc led by the United States. There we are, as well as the former country in the US's sphere of influence, the Philippines, followed by Japan, the UK, and all of the UK's former colonies or major former colonies, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. Then we have all of these countries in Europe. They're part of the Western Bloc. Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, France, Greece, I forgot what that country was, Italy, Turkey, and Portugal. Down here, folks, if you didn't catch it, this is British Guiana and French Guiana, two former colonies. All of these countries are in the first world. Second world countries, USSR, Eastern Bloc countries. Eastern Bloc is East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, also Cuba. Don't forget Cuba as a communist country as well, and China alongside the countries close to China, Vietnam, and North Korea. Now, third world countries. And here's where stuff gets a little interesting, like we talked about in class. First off, it's India and Yugoslavia who are not aligned. Question mark for me is, why is the world's largest democracy in terms of population considered a third world country? Country that now has developed so rapidly economically that it is expected it could become as powerful with manufacturing as eventually China, and that will have a population greater than China. Then let's look here in the Middle East, where we have Iran that is considered first world, but Saudi Arabia, that's considered third world. And then who knows what's going on with Yemen and Somalia? They're not communist, but they're considered second world. There to the east, Thailand, Bangladesh, Indonesia. Why is Thailand first world, but countries near it are not? Also, here in the south of Africa, Madagascar is third world, but this is a country which was called Namibia. Um, the countries immediately surrounding South Africa are considered first world. Side note, South Africa basically had colonies in this part of Africa. That could be the reason why, but again, this is a little bit of a gray area. And then we've got up here, if you didn't catch it, in Europe, Norway and Finland, third world, Spain, first world, but Switzerland, third world, Mexico and Central America, the countries there in Central America are third world, but Nicaragua actually had a communist revolution with the Sandinistas in the 1970s, but it doesn't show up as second world. And then we'll just not, think of anything as other than a big challenge when most of the rest of the continent of South America and the vast majority of the entire continent of Africa is considered third world. Colonization, assumptions about cultures and political systems, the Cold War polarizing the entire globe. This is why this system is so messy. So as the Cold War ended and things started to change in the 1990s, the view of first, second, and third world as being the way that we're going to look at countries politically changed. Economic globalization, increased levels of democracy, recognition of socio-political diversity, all contributed to this. Folks, if you have to write about this or respond in a longer question, like on a short response, here you go. Two possible, well, actually multiple possible reasons that you could pull in for why the three world model didn't work so well. And look at all these examples with the question marks. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. Ireland. Sad leprechaun. Don't tell Ms. Fallon that I didn't bring up Ireland at all in this example. She won't be happy with me. All right. So, what might be the problems when classifying these countries this way? It's very possible that after all of that and the gorgeous maps, you can identify more than just a few reasons. The more you know, the better you hopefully do on an assessment or class. And that wraps it up for this second set of review slides. There we go.